Whenever we hear news like India's GDP grew by 6% or 7%, we automatically assume that the country is developing. But here's the truth: GDP growth does not always mean that people's lives are getting better. In India, also, GDP numbers are rising. We are now the fourth largest economy, and that's great. But ground reality hits hard. A large section of the country is not even getting the basic necessities, and we see two Indias, one with a very high growth rate and the other one trying hard to just survive. Hi, this is Manisha. Let's see how checking GDP numbers alone as a measure of progress can be misleading for you. So, before understanding why GDP is not enough and can lead to misinterpretation of the economic reality, let's first understand what GDP is. GDP tells you the total monetary value of all goods and services produced in a country during a specific period, typically 1 year. So, whatever is produced, like cars, food, mobile phones, education, healthcare services, the combined value of all these is GDP. There are three methods to calculate the GDP: production approach, expenditure approach, and income approach. And all these methods should give the same result. Like in expenditure approach, GDP is equals to C plus I plus D plus X minus M, where C denotes the consumption, I denotes the private investment, G is government spending and investment, and X minus M denotes net exports, that is total exports minus imports. But why should we check GDP, and why does that even matter? Because GDP measures how much is produced, spent, and earned in an economy during a given period, and how this changes over time. So, if GDP is increasing, that means economy is producing more, and falling GDP means economic activity is slowing. So, we check GDP to get an idea if our economy is doing good or not. But this is the point to be noted, that GDP is not enough to check if a country is doing good or not, because GDP is not a measure of progress or development. See, development is a multi-dimensional concept. It includes not only the economic dimension but also social, environmental, and emotional dimension. So the problem is GDP is an imperfect measure of development because it ignores many aspects of human well-being, justice, and sustainability. So let's see what are the important aspects ignored by GDP, but they definitely affect our day-to-day life. First is GDP measures the economic output but not the quality of life. It is possible that output of an economy is increasing and therefore GDP is rising. But at the same time, a large section of the population is dealing with poor health and safety, low education levels, and longing for basic facilities. So, two countries can have similar GDP levels but a very different living standard. The quality of life may also depend on the distribution of the GDP among the residents of a country and not just the overall level. Which moves us to our next point, that is inequality. GDP does not show inequalities. It looks at the total income but not who earns it. So, if income rises only for rich people, GDP will still increase while the income inequality is rising. But development must be with fairness and inclusion, otherwise, it is social injustice. And this is the reason why we are seeing two very different pictures of India. In the book Capital in the 21st Century, Thomas Piketty has explained why this income inequality can be very dangerous for a country in the long term. As when it comes to planning the future of our nation, placing a significant amount of power in the hands of such a small group of people can be considered very dangerous. Next is GDP does not differentiate between the good and bad production. So wars and natural disasters also increases the GDP because there is an increase in the spending. Similarly, GDP also increases if pollution causes health problems or accidents increases the hospital expenses. Another important aspect is that GDP ignores the unpaid work like household work, childcare. It creates real value, but since no money is exchanged, GDP ignores them completely. And it leads to underestimating the real economic contribution, especially of women. Next is GDP does not tell us about the future well being or environmental sustainability. It ignores the pollution, deforestation, and climate harm. Cutting forest or overutilization of natural resources might increase the GDP today, but damages the long term development. Also, it does not consider the political or social conditions. GDP tells nothing about the political freedom, human rights, and security. It might be possible that GDP is rising on papers, but people of the country are deprived of their basic fundamental rights. So, GDP tells us how much is produced, but development is not just about how much you have produced. It's about how people live. Are they happy or not? How income is distributed, and whether the growth is sustainable or not. So, GDP cannot be taken as a proxy of progress, and we need direct measures of well being, inclusion, and sustainability to make a true assessment of the progress of a country. So, let's see what are the other indicators that you must check for that. First is GDP per capita. It is the total GDP divided by the total population. It shows the average income per person. A country where GDP is rising but population is rising even faster, then GDP per head will be declining. That means people may still have the lower living standard. Two countries may have same GDP, but if one has large population, living standards of these two countries will be very different. Next is Human Development Index. Development should not be judged by just seeing the total output by a country. Development must include human well being. So, HDI focuses on the most important dimensions of progress, that is, health, education, and standard of living. Health is measured by the life expectancy, education is measured by the years of schooling, and standard of living by the income per capita. Another factor is genuine progress indicator. GPI includes the factors that are ignored by GDP, like economic, social, and environmental factors. GPI adds the household work, higher education benefits, child care, and subtracts the externalities like pollution, climate damage, income inequality, and crimes and accidents. So, pollution may increase the GDP, but GPI will show the reality. Now, as GPI focuses on the cost and benefit aspects of growth, there's one more indicator, Better Life Index, that focuses on the quality of life. It focuses on the real living conditions like education, work life balance, air and water quality, and overall happiness. Last is Gini Index. It measures the income inequality in a country. A higher value means more inequality, and a lower value means more equal distribution of income. Income inequality is a much bigger problem than it seems to be. Even if the GDP and GDP per capita are rising, high inequality can slow the social and economic progress. So, measuring progress of a nation just on the basis of GDP growth will mislead you. So, you must check the other indicators along with GDP. Literacy rate, life expectancy, mortality rates, unemployment rates, air and water quality, sanitation. All these are the factors that are a true measure of the progress of a nation and affects your day-to-day life. So that was all for today's video. If you like the video, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I will see you in the next one.